The podcast you're about to listen to may contain random lines from musical theater, terrible attempts at regional accents, and a sincere discussion about mental health. You have been warned. Are you ready to start singing with your feet? Formidable. Allez, c'est parti. Non, nous ne sommes pas fous, nous ne sommes pas ivres, nous sommes juste dans la joie. Une joie profonde, nos cœurs elle inonde. Cette joie, elle vient du ciel. Non, nous ne sommes pas fous.
Welcome to Sing With Your Feet, the podcast in which we take those little rocks out of our glass slippers and, with a little bit of fairy dust, turn them into actionable steps to make our lives better. The podcast in which we learn how to listen to what is at the very heart of our irritations so they don't rule us any longer, or at least that our feelings about them don't rule us anymore. The podcast in which we learn compassion for ourselves, knowing when to let ourselves off the hook when it comes to things that we can't control, and in which we practice expressing those things to the people we love so that we can get the help that we desperately need. My name is Lily Fields, and I'm going to be your fairy godmother for the next half hour or so. We have a lot on our plate today, so let's just jump right in. Now, Lily Fields. Oh, that's you. That's one of those poorly done regional accents that Matt talked about at the top of the show. You sound like a Southern belle to me, and I kind of like you that way. Glass slippers? Glass slippers? Do you know the last time I wore heels, Lily Fields? All right, you want to talk about shoes? Let's talk about shoes for a second, country bumpkin. Because while I am speaking about removing metaphorical rocks from metaphorical glass slippers, I have no shortage of things to say on the subject of real shoes, especially considering that this podcast is literally called Sing With Your Feet. So I am going to digress for just a second. You know, I do sing often, even with my voice and not just my feet. In the years after I had my babies, I stopped wearing heels to perform in. I had been, until those scalawags were born, an avowed wearer of unthinkably high heels. My friend Caroline would say, well, there goes Lily again, wearing shoes meant for the eyes and not for the feet. And although I hated to admit it, she was usually right. When my postpartum depression lifted, one of the first things I did was go into my closet and get out my favorite pair of heeled boots. I put those on, and for the first time in 4 years, I had the posture of a woman who knew what she wanted, who knew where she was going, and knew that nothing could stop her from doing it. That very day, I was to be singing backup for the brilliant Matt Kugler, who sings the theme music for the show, and who warned you that my accent skills were quite limited. I was having a great time. It often happens when I start singing and really enjoying myself that I stamp my feet a little bit. It's idiosyncratic. It's just part of who I am. Well, that day, the very first time in 4 years that I wore heels to sing in, mid-foot stomp, the heavy wood heel of my right boot went flying across the stage, and I had to finish our set on one foot. You would think that would serve as a lesson to me, but it did not. I just got the shoe fixed and wore them again next time. To reassure you, at this very moment, I am wearing zebra-striped Converse high tops and a fancy yellow sundress. I do own some practical footwear, you see. Holy cow, did I digress there? Sorry. All that to say, I know you're not wearing glass slippers, silly, but that feeling of having a rock in our shoe is among the most annoying, most irritating sensations known to women. And I would bet that you have a few things in your daily life that are like those little rocks. You would love for those annoyances to go away, but you can't figure it out. And that's what fairy dust is for. Don't worry, I'll explain. Sometimes, though, towels on the floor are not just towels on the floor. And now don't you go off on another tangent there, Little Fields, but towels on the floor, well, they are just towels on the floor. Well, yes, they are towels on the floor, but they don't always mean what our country bumpkin minds make them out to mean. That person you live with who leaves the towel on the floor doesn't necessarily do it to drive you nuts. As a matter of fact, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. They probably don't do it to drive you nuts. But what do you mean, Lilyfields, about letting ourselves off the hook? Aren't you the one who always says that hard work pays off? Yes, my dear. That is the motto of the International League of Fairy Godmothers. Hard work always pays off. And I do take that very seriously. But there are circumstances in our life that we need to just accept. Ones that we need to find workarounds for. And very often, we can't do this on our own. We need to learn how to ask for help. Which is, admittedly, a very difficult thing for some of us to do. Well, if you ask me, Littlefields, it sounds like you just want us to live la vie en rose. La vie en rose. You know, Country Bumpkin, there is a difference between living our ideal life and living la vie en rose. It comes down to the difference between plans and wishes. Before I digress yet again from the topic of learning how to ask for the help we need, I want to quickly remind you about our private Facebook group that's called You Are Not Done Sparkling Yet. Since March 1st, we have been taking a deep, day-by-day dive into the themes that make up the overarching ideal life exercise. The goal is to get us thinking about the tiny, practical things that we can do to make progress towards our ideal life. This topic of asking for the help we need will surely come up. No woman is an island, not at home, not at work, and not in her extracurricular activities. Sparkling is a community affair, and sometimes we need help to find the ways to articulate our needs, and sometimes we need encouragement from people on the other side of the world to go out there and ask for it. And also, this is your weekly reminder that you might really need professional help. You might need a therapist or a counselor. Find one in your area, find one online, find one who can take you on and help you unpack some of the deep-seated reasons why it's so hard for you to get what you need. Get professional help. Are you nodding? I think I hear you nodding. Good girl. Layla Kelly, your wicked stepsister, has the intriguing day job of heading up an end-of-life planning consulting firm called Leaving Well. As any death doula worth her salt, she has a few thoughts on the nuances between planning and wishing. I'm going to pass the podcast over to Layla for a bit. Wicked stepsister, the dance floor is all yours.
Let's have a wicked conversation. But first, by way of a little reminder, do you remember why I'm wicked? A couple episodes back, I explained that people tend to find my choice of conversation unpleasant. Some might say extremely unpleasant. And extremely unpleasant is a rather informal definition of wicked. So, with that definition in mind, let's get to it. Let's have a wicked conversation. Today's topic is final wishes. You may be surprised to learn that this term, final wishes, is a term I don't really care for. It implies mere thoughts or hopes, and I think we can do better. No, scratch that. I think we should do better than just final hopes. Don't get me wrong. I want you to think about your final wishes, your ideas, and your preferences. But then, I want you to go a step further. I want you to turn those wishes into actual plans. Maybe you're thinking, oh, that sounds like work. Oh, it is. But it's also an act of love, and therefore, it's worth the effort. When we create an end-of-life action plan, we give our loved ones a roadmap. Perhaps you're thinking, I really haven't cut that wide a swath. I'm not that impactful. No maps required for this exit. Sometimes we sell ourselves a bit short. But trust me, you matter. Even just the thought of you not existing sets off panic alarms in the hearts of your family and your friends. The thought of you not being there makes them feel lost. They need a map. So give them what they need. Think about your ideal death and then make an actionable plan, a roadmap for you and your loved ones to follow. And here's the big thing. Don't just draw the map. Discuss it. Have conversations about what you want and how you plan to make it happen. Perhaps you could try this. Bring up a celebrity death in a low-key, easy way. Maybe something like, did you see that Luke Perry was buried in a mushroom suit? What kind of burial would you want? It's that simple. Just get the ball rolling. I need a quick little sidebar here about Luke Perry. I'm going to post a link in the comments, but there are 4 quick things that I want to comment on. Number 1, Luke Perry was a hottie. Number 2, he chose a burial option he was passionate about. He had done his research. Number 3, he chose green burial. I love that, and maybe we can chat about green burial later. Number 4, he was 52 when he died, and yet he had had conversations with his family. They knew what he wanted. Be like Luke. Start having these conversations. Don't just wish. Make a plan and share it with those you love. Remember, talking about death won't kill you. I promise.
Wow, I really appreciate you putting that into words for us, Layla. It is so easy for us to get caught up in our heads and then forgetting that those we love can't read our minds. You know, I find that story about Luke Perry so interesting that I'm going to put a link in the show notes. First to Layla's work and then to that story about the mushroom burial suit. Remember what she says, talking about death won't kill you, and reading about it won't either.
Alors on chante, on danse, on fait la fête, comme au ciel.
After my children went back to school post-lockdown in 2020, hand washing was elevated to a whole new level in our house, as I'm sure it was for you too. Oh, there were songs to be sung and soap pumps to be filled and hand animals to be made. Oh, there were filthy mirrors to be cleaned. Now, what's the relationship, you may ask? Well, it's about my children's absolute refusal to dry their hands on a towel. Oh, for days, I could not figure out what was going on in the bathroom. Why in the world that mirror was such a mess? Then, one day, I caught the boys washing their hands, and I saw that instead of drying them on the towel, which was 100% hidden in plain sight and completely at their disposal, they just flicked their wet hands a few times at the mirror, and they were done with it. No amount of asking them not to do this seemed to make a difference at all. Now, I have a theory about dealing with these little tiny irritations, these little tiny proverbial rocks in our shoes. Here's my theory. If it is within our power to do something about it, and if it takes less than 1 minute, we should just do it now. Just do it now. Don't question it. It's nearly as simple as removing a rock from our shoe. Sure, you gotta take the shoe off, but once the rock is out, the irritation is gone. So, to help, we got to start by formulating the irritation in the form of an ideal life statement. For example, in my ideal life, I am a person who has a clean bathroom mirror. Then I grab the paper towel and I clean the bathroom mirror. 2 things are being accomplished with this. Number 1, you're getting closer to your ideal life. And number 2, you have a clean mirror. And it took less than a minute. This, my friends, is what's called progress. And progress is a call for celebration. So how exactly does one celebrate a clean mirror, you may ask? Well, here's what I did. I stood in front of my sparklingly clear mirror. I looked myself in the eye and I said, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all?" And I swear I heard the mirror reply, "You are, Lily Fields." In my home live 2 little boys, 1 indulgent husband, an ancient black cat, and me. Over Valentine's Day, the 3 other humans went on a little trip, leaving just the black cat and me. For 4 days, I had no one I had to be for anyone. Where I would drop my keys would stay. If I left the door unlocked, it stayed unlocked. If I left my clothes on the floor, they stayed on the floor. If I didn't make my bed stayed unmade. And if I left dishes in the sink, they stayed unwashed. Now, can I be honest about something that happened? At one point, I walked into the bathroom, and I saw a pile of clothes out of the corner of my eye, on the floor. I hadn't turned the light on yet. It was just clothes on the floor. And I felt a familiar rush of emotion. Just a little flash. It's the one that feels like a cocktail of being disrespected and taken for granted and unloved and unlistened to. And I actually had this thought, oh, why don't they put their things away? Except that the they in that sentence was actually me. I did that. I was the one who didn't put things away. That pile of dirty clothes on the bathroom floor was entirely my fault. And the reason why I didn't put them away had nothing to do with disrespecting myself or taking myself for granted or not loving myself or not listening to my repeated requests for dirty clothes to go into the washing machine or into the hamper. It was simply because I forgot. You see, the people we live with do not solely exist to disrespect us, to take us for granted, or to prove to us that we're unlovable. Listen to what I'm going to say. We are always within our right to ask the people we live with for their help. Very often we don't ask. We just expect them to read our minds. Asking is a first step to getting what we need. Once we've asked, we cannot then take their failure to act personally. We must believe. It is our job to believe in the good intentions of the people that we live with. This is part of giving our enthusiastic consent to the life we live now and the circumstances in which we currently live. I want to suggest that the one thing you can do to make this part of your life less painful is to learn how to ask for what you need. It's a very hard thing to do, believe me, I know. Learning to ask in different ways with our words, whether it's a little handwritten note on the counter before you walk out the door or a text message. Well, I'm not going to suggest that we start nagging, because that's really not what I mean. But I do believe that for a great number of us who struggle with expressing our own desires and our own needs, and even with setting limits sometimes, learning how to ask for what we truly need, what would truly be of help to us, is another critical step towards living our ideal life. Start by standing in front of that perfectly clean, sparkling bathroom mirror and start expressing your needs out loud to yourself first. Hear what it sounds like for your needs to be articulated in your own voice. Get used to that sound. Get used to the feel of the words in your mouth. What I need from you right now is, go ahead, say those words out loud right now. What I need from you right now is, practice this. Practice makes progress. I have mentioned this before, but at the same time as I was experiencing postpartum depression, my body also decided to start down that inevitably exciting road called perimenopause. Bless you if you have no idea what that means, but I'm going to try to define it, okay? It's like adolescence, only now you're a grown-up with access to heavy machinery and you have the responsibility for small children. Yeah. One of my favorite podcasts is called Sawbones. It's hosted by Sydney and Justin McElroy, and it's touted as being a marital tour of misguided medicine. On Sawbones, Sydney, who's a medical doctor, discusses the history of certain ailments, or at least those which were historically considered to be ailments, and the sundry medical cures for those ailments. Justin, for his part, makes topics like hemorrhoids, birth control, and leprosy more approachable by standing in for us who know nothing but are nonetheless darkly curious. It is always enlightening, often laugh out loud funny, and sometimes absolutely terrifying. What frightened me was an episode about an ailment that was once called hysteria. That is, any inexplicable malady that a woman might experience, ranging from lack of libido to too much libido, mood swings, depression, fatigue, forgetfulness, ambition. Anything that was ailing, quote unquote, a woman was lumped into this category of diagnosis. Now, while this sounds awful, let me just digress for a second and tell you that at one time in history, in the very city where I live, women with these very same symptoms could be accused of being a witch, like with the broom and everything. So at least this garbage diagnosis of hysteria wasn't going to find us burned at the stake anymore. The treatments for hysteria are laughable by today's standards too, but one in particular did eventually give rise to the modern sex toy industry, so maybe it's not all bad. But how about, for the unlucky ones, a lobotomy? Why, I don't mind if I do. On Sawbones, Justin McElroy apologizes to women across history for the ways that we have been misdiagnosed. This is rather cathartic and deeply, deeply satisfying. You should listen to the episode just to hear him do that. I'll put a link in the show notes to that episode of Sawbones just so you can hear Justin do that. While we can laugh and cringe at the fact that there was a time in history, not even that long ago, when women, particularly women of a certain age, were considered to have a, and I quote, wandering womb, and that was what made them act outside of societal norms, this episode freaked me out. Why did you freak out, Lily? Well, here's what happened. It was lunchtime. As I mentioned, given my perimenopausally induced, abnormally uncool chill factor these days, I needed to start being markedly more intentional about some very, very simple things. Things like putting away the bread knife when I was done using it, or putting my phone always back on the counter in the same place when I got home. Failure to do these things caused me, with no exaggeration whatsoever, to experience rage unlike anything I'd known before. To be clear, it wasn't the fact that I didn't put the item away that made me crazy. It was the fact that I couldn't find it when I went to look for it that enraged me. Prior to my hormonal roller coaster, I could simply step back and with absolute chill say, okay, well, where's the last place I used it? And typically, within 30 seconds, but sometimes maybe as long as a minute, I would remember. However, as I have previously established, I have zero chill anymore. None. Nowadays, my mind plays tricks on me. So when I don't put the knife away immediately, my brain fills in the hole and tells me, but you were just using it, and I remember you putting it away. But my brain can't tell that it was 3 days ago that I intentionally put it away, not that 2 hours ago I left it in the sink and put a bunch of dishes on top of it. My brain doesn't care about the details. It just remembers that I did once in my life put away the knife with intention. And without fail, I will start to freak out. But I was just using the knife. I just saw it. And then brandishing the ultimate tool in the toolbox of my misery, I will whisper, I am losing my mind. Yeah, kind of. Or maybe it's just my wandering womb. The same thing happened the other day with a document I needed to give to my husband. I checked everywhere for this document, which, if it is not kept in my wallet, is kept in a very, very specific place. And naturally, this day, it was in neither. And I was walking out the door to catch a train. Being late would set me back for the whole day, and I could not find this stupid document. And I left without giving it to him. I ended up finding it much later in the day in my purse, where I had already spent 10 minutes searching for it that morning. It had gotten squished up under some new face masks. So it's not just selective memory, it's selective vision as well. I'm losing my mind. Well, yeah, kind of. It's that stupid wandering womb again. So it's lunchtime. I gave the keys of the apartment to the eldest scalawag who likes to take the elevator by himself and unlock the door like a big guy. I usually come up a few minutes later. I saw where he had put the keys upon entering. They were on a little piece of furniture in the hall by the front door. My keys have a bright green Ampleman keychain on it. It's green and it's super cute. I didn't touch it or anything. I just saw the Ampleman and I said to myself, okay, my keys are right there. Instead of picking them up and putting them away where I always go to look for the keys, I just left them there. I actually walked by them. 3 or 4 times I moved things around them and put those things away. There was a grocery bag, a water bottle, a cardigan, a schoolcraft project, and some mail. I was putting that stuff away mindlessly in a concerted effort to make my own life easier later. In the meantime, my youngest scalawag, he got himself into some kind of snit about something and decided that he didn't want to go back to school after lunch. I forced his little shoes onto his feet, and I got on my own scarf and my own coat, and I sat over him trying to zip up his coat for far longer than I needed to while he flailed and cried about not wanting to go back. So FYI, my chill factor was negative, as was his. Once everyone had their coats on, I reached for the keys, and they were no longer there. How was this possible? They were right there. I had been moving things around them since we got home. The keys had been right there. So I went to the place where I usually would look for the keys, and they weren't there. I checked my coat pockets. I checked my other coat pockets. I checked the pocket in my purse where I carry my keys. I looked around on the floor, and I was getting increasingly panicked with every single second because now, not only could I not find my keys, my youngest was now wailing and shouting rhythmically, "I'm not going. I'm not going. I'm not going." Then I stopped searching for my keys, and I turned to my youngest, and I said, "What did you do with the keys?" "I don't have the keys," he shouted, which it's not unheard of that he might misplace something by accident or by accident on purpose on that little piece of furniture. He's done it before. He'll sweep my sunglasses into one of the drawers or something. Now, the eldest scalawag is starting to get impatient by this point because he is clearly a genetic descendant of both my father, my sister, and myself and cannot stand the thought of being late to anything. So he's chanting, "We're going to be late. We're going to be late. We're going to be late." And my youngest is saying, "I'm not going. I'm not going." And I have lost the keys that were only minutes before sitting right there. I'm losing my mind, I said. And then I started shouting, "Mais c'est pas possible, mais ce n'est pas possible. Je perds la boule. It's not possible, it's not possible. I'm losing my marbles." And I was speaking in French to benefit my neighbors who were walking past the door, hearing all of us uttering a mantra of some kind. I took a third and a fourth look in the basket where I always keep the keys. I went into my coat pockets again, into my purse again. Everyone is now chanting, and no one is happy. Lobotomy, welcome. For some reason, I reached into the back pocket of my pants and realized that I had, at some point, while mindlessly putting away the cardigan and the grocery bag that I thought I was doing myself a favor putting away, well, I mindlessly put my keys in my back pocket. I said nothing besides, "Let's go." And I stormed out into the hallway, beckoning to the boys. "But we can't leave the apartment open," my eldest objected, panicking yet again. And how do I explain to him gently that my womb is wandering and I'm losing my mind? "Oh, we won't," I told him, and I held up the keys. "You're going to lock it for us." This kind of thing did not used to happen to me, or at least if it did, I didn't freak out about it. But I'd been feeling like it was happening more and more often, and I was having less and less chill about it. I needed to find strategies to deal with my lack of chill. First, I needed to find a phrase to replace "I am losing my mind." That may be what it feels like, but I needed to not stoke the rage by saying those words out loud. I read something on a completely unrelated subject that reminded us to just breathe. And while I hate that kind of pat, pretty advice, I was thinking I might just have to take it. But I also I wanted to learn how to deal with this with humor. Like imagining the voice of Justin McElroy saying, "Oh, hysteria. Well, it's just the wandering womb again." I'm also all the more determined that I must keep my house decluttered. I need to make sure that there's a designated home for everything and that I put things away immediately when I find them if they're not in their designated home. It's also incredibly important to get the buy-in from my family members about this, because while they may not intentionally be trying to make me crazy, when they don't put things back where they go, they are not helping. So they can help me keep me in my right mind by putting things away if they find them too. I talked to my doctor about this, and he said, "Every woman goes through it, madame." He's a man, keep in mind, telling me that my menopausal brain fog is just a phase. I would love for him to live with this for just 24 hours. If men experience perimenopause for just one day in their lives, there would be solutions, real solutions, not just temporary hormonal solutions that put off the discomfort for a few years. I would have just as easily accepted him saying to me, "Breathe, madame. It's just your wandering womb again." But let me tell you one thing, one positive thing that came from all my hysteria. I have no filter anymore, and especially not with my indulgent husband. Things got so bad with my mental health, with this feeling that I was crazy, that I had to ask him for help. I needed his buy-in to make sure that whenever possible, for my sanity, that the keys were always put back in their designated place. If he found them, he would put them back there. To make sure that whenever possible, he would put the bread knife back where it belongs. Once he understood that I wasn't just snapping at him, or not just snapping at anyone, not because I was a mean old lady, but once he understood that this fog was a real point of suffering for me, he, because he is an indulgent and kind man, started making a concerted effort to help alleviate the little things that triggered my hysteria. You see, in the midst of the things that we can't control, there are small things that honesty and authenticity can help us make progress in. In this case, I can't do anything about the menopausal fog, but being honest about how it was making me doubt my sanity, I ended up getting the help that I really needed. Please remember to join us in the private Facebook group called You Are Not Done Sparkling Yet for our nitty-gritty examination of the ideal life themes. I'll link to it in the show notes. You'll also find a link to Laela's website and some of her resources about planning for her own death. She covers some really sensitive topics with compassion and kindness and even a touch of humor. You'd do well to check it out. You can follow the show on Facebook or Instagram at Sing With Your Feet. And you can also reach out to me on social media at Lilyfields Challenge or by email, lily@lilyfieldschallenge.com. That's Lily, Lily. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. And by rating and reviewing the podcast, you help other people find it too. Thank you so much for sharing it with the people you think could use a fairy godmother. A great big thank you to Seven Production here in Mulhouse, France for the use of the song La Joie for the intro and outro to the show, to Matt Kugler who sang it, to Claude Eckley who wrote it. Boy, oh boy, you guys know how to bring La Joie. This is your fairy godmother signing off. Just remember, it is never too late to start singing with your feet.